Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. I hope you're having an incredible day or night in Jesus. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit the bell notification when you subscribe and share with your friends and family. Put it on social media. Let's dive in. We're looking today at 14 evidences for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Of course, 1 Corinthians 15, among others, shows us that this is the centrality of the Christian faith. That if Jesus be not risen, you're yet in your sins. So let's get started. This is a class I teach up at Indiana Bible College. So I will make a disclaimer or two before we get started that in a brief video like this, obviously, you can't go into every evidence like you would like to. You could probably teach an entire college course just on this, as Gary Habermas has written a humongous book, 795 pages, just on this subject. So there are nuances here, so we might not be able to flesh them all out the way we'd like to. So again, let's jump in. First, there is an empty tomb. Where's the body? First thing, where's the body? There is no body except in heaven, of course. No body has ever been claimed. The story of where the body supposedly went is exposed in the story in Matthew chapter 28, in that which was made up with money. A couple of recent attempts, such as the Jesus family tomb and the nail of crucifixion, have shown to be totally farcical as far as there is a body. No theory of the escape of Jesus holds up to evidence, such as the swoons theory, that Jesus, after getting beat, after he'd been crucified, after he'd been wrapped in 200-300 pounds of spices and linens, is put into a tomb. The coldness of the tomb wakes him up, and he somehow escapes out, has to crawl on his knees because he's got nail prints on his hand, and this single person rolls away a massive 2 or 3 ton stone and walks on his knees, hiding somewhere in Jerusalem, never again to be seen. Obviously, the height of credulity there. The mass delusion theory. There are so many different theories. The enemies didn't dispute it. Over the centuries of testimony that Jesus, in fact, rose from the dead. When I say the enemies didn't dispute, of course, Matthew 28, when I'm talking about later enemies, didn't say, those silly Christians, of course, he rose from the dead, here is his body. There is no evidence of that. So secondly is the Gospels as historical documents. Simon Greenleaf, Craig Evans, Gary Habermas, Michael Laconia, among so many others, N.T. Wright, show that the Bible is in fact a historical document. The resurrection is part of that historicity, that all of the place names, the people names, the titles, the customs, the geography, the climate of the Holy Land is all consistent with absolute truth and verity. Now, thirdly, the psychology of the events, or the psychological factor, from fear to faith. They're hiding, they're scared. Then all of a sudden they're going to go take over the world with the gospel, not fearing Caesar's sword or pagan's wrath. Well, doesn't make much sense unless there was an event that motivated them from fear to faith. They didn't even believe the women's testimony, running to the tomb, Peter and John did. Next is the Nazareth decree, among other archaeology. This Nazareth decree, properly interpreted in about 48 AD, says that the death penalty comes to people robbing graves in Nazareth. Think about the specificity of the location of that decree and the uniqueness of it not being found anywhere else in the Roman lands, but also like the Alexamenos Graffitito of crucifixion. So many other archaeological discoveries would show this as well. Also, early Christian writings, non-biblical Christian writings, such as Clement of Rome, Quadratus, Ignatius, on and on. And we use Christian in a broad sense of that term. In some cases, all assume the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. The existence of Christianity itself shows us that there's a central proposition that all Christians believed. It was seen above about 500 at once. Paul's appealing to it a couple decades after the fact, saying, go ask these people. They can tell you. Usually there would be a divergence of understanding among witnesses. He's saying there's a unanimity among the witnesses. Number 7, the number and the variety of witnesses. We've mentioned the over 500. Women as well. The occupations, their various locations and status within the Holy Land, from fishermen to zealots to on and on. There's just a wide variety. Paul the Pharisee. And then appeal to witnesses over a wide geographic area as well, that Jesus, in fact, rose from the dead. This occurs both within the Holy Land, but then again, as you go outward, that when converts are being made in Antioch and then throughout the entire world, they're all attesting, yes, this man, in fact, rose from the dead. There must be something to the central proposition there. And then the appeal to the Old Testament, that the Messiah would rise. Psalm 22, Isaiah 53. All of these are saying the Old Testament was used. Yes, that Jesus is going to die and be risen from the dead. Paul would quote this on his missionary journeys. And then the accuracy of the biblical events mentioned, the customs. It happened at the Passover. There was a high priest mentioned. There was a Sanhedrin mentioned. The political situation, Pilate, Herod, all of it matches perfectly. Secular history and enemies, such as Agrippa, but also like Pliny the Elder, Tacitus, Suetonius, on and on, all show that the resurrection actually happened. The Talmud, again, there's no hint of the body found in the Talmud, even when it mentions so often early Christianity, Jesus and people surrounding him. And then the events of the time, the earthquake and the darkness, which show that there was something like Pilate, like, make it as sure as you can, that this was the reason for the situations around it, the veil being rent in twain, the sacrifices not being accepted, even from a Jewish perspective, after the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And lastly, as in John Wyndham's The Easter Enigma and Who Moved the Stone by Frank Morrison, there is no holes in the narrative. There's no, as you read all 4 accounts and then Paul's accounts, well, what aboutism? But if this, how about that? None of that. There's no holes in the narrative. All 14 of these proofs combined show that Jesus rose from the dead. It's the greatest event in all of history. And I would encourage you to believe it today. People throughout history have went to disprove it and found themselves on their knees crying out, like the writer Ben-Hur did, "My Lord and my God." God bless you. Talk with you later. Jesus is risen indeed. Amen.